Okafor's quarters felt like a confessional designed by someone who'd forgotten the meaning of mercy. The space was sparse to the point of austerity: regulation desk, 2 chairs, a narrow cot that looked like it had never been slept in. The only personal touch was a photograph on the desk, Okafor in dress uniform beside a woman with kind eyes. Both looked younger, happier. The frame's glass was cracked. "Sit." Okafor gestured to the chair across from his desk, then settled into his own with the careful economy of movement Kael had learned to associate with pain. The prosthetic arm whirred softly as it adjusted position. Kael sat, trying to read the commander's expression. The usual stoic mask was in place, but something underneath had shifted. The way Okafor studied him now carried a weight of familiarity that made his skin crawl. "Tell me about the voice." The question hit like a physical blow. Not, "Do you hear voices?" or "Are there any unusual symptoms?" "Tell me about the voice." As if Okafor already knew it existed. "I don't know what you. The fragment speaks to you." Okafor's tone carried absolute certainty. "When did it start using words instead of impulses?" Heat flooded Kael's cheeks. The frequency had been increasingly vocal since the null encounter, its whispers growing more complex and conversational. But he'd never mentioned that to anyone, not even Ren. "How do you?" "When, cadet?" "After the first drain." The admission scraped his throat raw. "Started with questions. Now it comments on things. Offers suggestions." Okafor's flesh hand drummed against the desk surface. "What does it want?" "To survive. To not be hungry." Kael swallowed hard. "To find others like itself. The other fragments." Again, that certainty. As if Okafor was checking his answers against information he already possessed. Kael studied the commander's face, looking for tells, for anything that might explain how he knew so much about something that supposedly defied explanation. His gaze settled on the prosthetic arm. The limb was military-grade, high-end medical tech that should have been indistinguishable from flesh. But in the harsh overhead lighting, Kael could see faint scarring where it connected to Okafor's shoulder. Not clean surgical incisions, but ragged tissue that spoke of trauma. Of something being torn away in violence. "You had one." The words left his mouth before conscious thought could stop them. "You carried a fragment, and you." "I asked about the voice, cadet." But the deflection confirmed everything. Okafor's 2 specific questions, his knowledge of the fragment's nature, the way he'd taken Kael's transformation in stride. The prosthetic wasn't the result of combat injury or zone exposure. It was self-inflicted amputation. "He carried one of US, the frequency whispered with sudden interest. "I can taste its residue in the air. The signal. My sibling who loved words more than flesh." Kael forced his expression to remain neutral, but inside his chest, his heart hammered against his ribs. The frequency could sense traces of its counterpart, could identify which fragment had bonded with Okafor. But the commander had somehow broken free, at the cost of his arm. "The hunger grows stronger," Okafor continued as if nothing had happened. "Each drain makes the next one easier. More tempting. Eventually, feeding becomes as natural as breathing." "You're speaking from experience." Okafor's good hand moved to touch the prosthetic shoulder, fingers tracing the scarred connection point. For just a moment, vulnerability cracked through his professional mask. "Don't let it get comfortable, Morrow. The more it talks, the more it wants. And what it wants will consume everything you are." The warning carried the weight of lived experience, of choices that had cost more than flesh and bone. Kael wanted to ask how Okafor had severed the connection, what it had required, whether freedom was even possible. But the commander's expression had shifted back to official business. "Your abilities are now classified under Section 7 protocols. Okafor pulled a tablet from his desk drawer, fingers dancing across its surface. Black file designation. Anyone who speaks about what they witnessed will face court-martial. Black file. Threats to core operational security. Weapons too dangerous for standard classification. The tablet's screen reflected in Okafor's eyes like a digital funeral pyre. As of this moment, you don't exist in any official capacity. Your records are sealed, your status classified, your very presence here subject to need-to-know restrictions. The words fell like stones into still water, each one creating ripples that would change everything. Kael was no longer a cadet, no longer a person in the Corps' eyes. He was a resource. A weapon to be controlled or contained. Report to Lab 7 tomorrow at 0800 hours. Okafor's tone had gone completely professional. Dr. Vance will be conducting comprehensive tests. Commander. Dismissed, Cadet. Kael stood, his legs unsteady beneath him. At the door, he turned back. What was its name? Your fragment. Okafor's hand moved to his prosthetic again. The signal. The door closed behind Kael with mechanical finality, leaving him alone in the corridor with the frequency's whispers echoing in his mind. He cut it out, came the voice, electric with fascination. That is why his arm is gone. My sibling loved words, loved communication. When he tried to silence it, the removal nearly killed him. Kael stood frozen as understanding crystallized. Okafor hadn't just carried a fragment, he'd found a way to remove it. But the process had required amputation, and even now, years later, the commander bore the scars of that desperate surgery. The question wasn't whether escape was possible. The question was what price it would demand.